Well, hi everybody and welcome to another piano video here at the Merriam Pianos YouTube channel. I am Stu Harrison and today's video is going to be how to select an upright piano. We've done other videos like this. We've done a digital piano series where we gave some suggestions on how to prioritize certain features and wind up at a digital that's the ultimate solution for you. And today we're going to tackle uprights in exactly the same way. So it's a little different than past videos we've done and maybe other videos you've seen out there that just gives you general considerations. We're going to put these in order and give you a bit of a formula where if you start at the top and wind up at the bottom, we think you will have wound up at a wonderful set of instruments for you to choose from that you're going to be really super happy and thrilled with. So thank you so much for joining us for the video today. If it's the first time that you are joining us here on YouTube, we would love for you to subscribe and become part of our wonderful user community. They leave comments, they teach me things, they'll teach you things, maybe you have things to teach us. So please do so, hit that notification bell as well because we would love for you to become part of our growing Merriam Pianos family on YouTube. And at the end of this video, we're going to throw in a few recommendations of our favorite pianos that are available on the market today in 2021. So without further ado, let's get started with this video right away. So we said it in the intro, we are going to give you a selection formula, if you will, on how to wind up with an upright piano that fits you and your family's needs without putting anything out of order or putting the wrong emphasis, in our humble opinion, on one feature or the other. The very first thing that I am going to suggest that you start with is size. Not budget, not country of origin, but size. Here's why. The size of an upright piano directly determines its volume. It directly determines how full and how clear the bass is. It does not matter how well a piano is made. If it's not loud enough or it doesn't have a clear enough bass, there are no other factors that will ever make up for that. This is like picking horsepower when you are going to choose a performance car. It could corner really well. It could have the best interior finishing, but if the car just isn't powerful enough to do what you need it to do, nothing will ever make up for that. And size for an upright piano has a huge factor. Well, it is the factor. You have very small upright pianos that can be as small as 42 inches in height. You have large upright pianos that could be 53 inches in height. Now, although that only sounds like a 20% difference, the proportional difference in string length is actually much larger. And so that's why that height difference can have such a big impact on how full the tone is and how much sound you need the piano to produce. Now, there are several factors which might influence your needs in this area. One could be the size of your room or the acoustics of your room. If you are putting this into a very large space, high ceilings, and it's going to be sort of in an entertainment area where this instrument needs to really fill a space, well, you might have the need for a larger piano. If you're going to be recording with this instrument, because increasingly people are using better, higher-end upright pianos to record with. This is becoming a bit of a trend and follows I guess the larger trend of people operating generally in smaller spaces in many areas of life. And so if you need that bass clarity, either for personal preference or for recording, and you need the volume, the fullness, because of a larger space, well, there's going to be certain heights that you just don't want to be below. And I would say for professional use, for recording use, to have a fairly balanced tone, 47 inches is going to be about the smallest that I've ever experienced that still gave me that. I know sometimes people will list 48 inches as kind of the absolute minimum. I personally haven't found that 48 is really the limit. I've seen it's more been in the 46.5 to 47 inch range is really the lower limit where I can still get some nice clear bass tone. Once you get below that, you really truly are into a miniaturized version of a piano. And it'll still sound like a piano and feel like a piano, but Usually the lower third of that piano is going to sacrifice some major bass clarity, and you're also going to be sacrificing some major dynamic output. So what are the risks here if you pick the wrong size piano? Well, if you pick a piano that's too small for your needs, you are going to be training yourself to operate an instrument that behaves very differently than other pianos that you might experience out there. And so this is more a consideration for students and professionals who might be recording. The recording thing, kind of obvious. If you just don't have the bass tone, you're not going to have a complete spectrum, and you're going to be pretty disappointed with the potential it has as a recording instrument. But for a student, this has an implication for exams or for recitals or other performances. If you spend most of your time learning to operate a piano with 200 horsepower, and then only a few times a year you're expected to get on a stage and somebody hands you a 1,000 horsepower behemoth, you just aren't going to know how to control it very well. And so the idea here is you want to have a piano at home that has the least amount of difference in dynamic response and dynamic range to a piano that you might be expected to perform on or to be evaluated on at some point. We'll never be able to close that gap completely, but that's the consideration. So just to wrap off this first point, size is where I would start. If your needs really are a 48-inch, then don't go looking for a 42-inch in a better brand or in a more, a higher class because you want to exchange size for quality. That is one that I would never recommend doing. So after you've established the size that's appropriate, the next thing you're going to want to do is pick a tone that satisfies your ear, that excites your musical soul. I know that sounds a little cheesy, but it's true. Sometimes we can't explain why we like the tones that we like. I have read comment after comment in various videos where you have some people preferring the sound of one instrument that we've evaluated, others preferring the sound of another that we've evaluated. I really do think that oral preference like that is as varied as our own palates. You know, certain wines that people prefer, certain flavors that people prefer. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason, and that's okay. But you do need to pick something that really truly excites you and wants to make you play. Several things go into what gives a piano its tone. Country of origin can have indirectly an influence. And that's because certain countries' piano industries are more known for construction practices, designs, and just overall quality control. If you buy a piano from Germany, you know that you are going to be getting a very clear tone, even if it happens to be more colorful or less colorful, better sustaining in the treble, better sustaining in the mid. You still have those variations, but if you have a piano that is really well constructed and put together, you're going to have this clarity. And if you have the ear for it, if you can hear the difference between a very clear tone and a tone that's a little dirtier, then that might not be a sacrifice you're willing to make. And so as you're picking that tone, as you're discerning that tone, country of origin may come into play. The style of the piano may also come into play because there are certain instruments which are designed to create a maximum level of color and dynamic response. Bechstein upright pianos, I think, really come to mind for me when I hear that type of description. There are other instruments that are going to be known for kind of extreme clarity and this beautiful shimmering sustain. Schimmel would be a piano, also happens to be a German piano that fits that bill. In a different category, if you are thinking about something that's got a pretty robust bass at a slightly lower type of budget, but still very colorful sound. Kawai is one that's got a very colorful sound. Yamaha would be one where it's a little clearer, maybe a little less color, but still sort of a really nice mid-range sustain to it. So it's important to understand what you want out of the piano, what you want out of the bass, the mid, the treble, and the kind of character that really inspires you to want to play. Because you may find that there's consistency either in country of origin or possibly a brand that does that for you. To give you an example of the type of variety of tone that's out there, here's a few selections of our past videos where we've evaluated brands such as Bechstein, Schimmel, Kauai, Yamaha, and Siler. So we know how big the piano needs to be, and now we've centered in on a style of tone that really resonates, pun intended, with our ears. Next comes how we are going to physically interface with the instrument. And this is also very important. Some people might suggest that the touch is the most important, but I've put it third for a reason. Great touch is never going to make up for bad tone. It's also never going to be able to invent bass that you need that just isn't there. So that's why it's in a third position. Touch can be described in a variety of ways. People will say that it's a light touch or it's a heavy touch. Sometimes this actually doesn't refer to the resistance the key provides, but rather the dynamic response that the piano gives. A piano could actually have a fairly heavy touch, but if it has an immediate and big dynamic response, your mind might still perceive that as a light touch because you ease up on your fingers because you're getting so much sound. So there's going to be the impression of whether you perceive it to be a light or heavy touch. Medium is usually the balance people look for between a sense of control and a sense of ease and dynamic range. The heavier a piano is, or the heavier you perceive it to be, the more physical the experience of playing it is going to be to get the full dynamic range. Something that's too light obviously usually has a huge amount of dynamic range, but is quite difficult to control in the lower dynamic ranges. So figuring out how heavy or how light you want that sense of touch to be is quite important. And this has less to do with quality and more to do with stylistic, subjective differences from builder to builder. We did a comparison just a few weeks ago between a Schimmel upright piano and a Bechstein upright piano, and the difference in touch, even though both instruments were considered premium, both instruments were German, was quite remarkable. Schimmel had a much firmer bottom to the key bed. It had a different sense of depth to the key. The let-off was regulated slightly differently, and the whole dynamic range of the instrument was a little bit different versus the Bechstein. So it's important to figure out what that touch is after you've arrived at the tone that you want, and just know your own playing. I would definitely suggest that if you're in the market for a premium upright of any kind, spend the time to play it for an extended period of time in the showroom. Don't sit down for 5 minutes. Sit down for 30 minutes. Make sure that that sense of weight, that sense of resistance is consistent with what you're already used to, or at least that you understand what it's going to be like after you play it for some time. I would also check the repetition speed. This usually is more a function of how well the action is regulated. Most actions can be regulated to achieve a fairly high repetition speed, although when you get right up into the ultra high end of repetition speed, design does become a factor. So repetition speed should be considered. And then something that almost nobody ever talks about, which is the surface of the keys and how they round the edges of the keys. You wouldn't think that this is a big deal, but if you don't like how the keys feel, this is something that will pop up very soon after you have the instrument at home, and you have limited options to adjust this. Some keys are quite a bit sharper on the front, some keys are much less rounded on the side, and although you'll likely get used to whatever it is, why not start with something that just feels comfortable at the beginning? So don't ignore that while you are selecting the touch. Is the surface of the black and white keys, how they're rounded, and how your fingers just feel as they're maneuvering around them and on top of them. The fourth is budget. The reason budget is fourth and not first is that if you follow number 1, number 2, and number 3, you are going to come into a subset of instruments that has still a fairly wide range of price. When I am consulting with customers on helping them through their journey, we will usually talk about tone, we'll usually talk about size and the style of touch. And sometimes we wind up at a range that is as wide as like $8,000 up to $40,000 of pianos that will all generally fall into the categories that we've talked about in terms of the size, in terms of the touch, in terms of the style of tone. And so once you've got that subset of instruments down, then I believe that's where budget can come into play. Because you know the flavor you want, now it's just a matter of how refined you want that flavor to be, and potentially how long you'd like it to last. Quality of a piano does really have an impact on the longevity of that piano, and so budget can affect that. But normally it's the refinement and the sophistication of the design which leads to a more refined tone. Usually sustain is a bit better the higher you go. Usually the color is more consistent between the different ranges the higher you go. Tuning stability can be better the higher you go. And you need to buy a piano you can afford. So it's nice once you have all of that whittled down into a set of maybe 4 or 5 instruments, then to consider budget and see where you want to be, on that thermometer of price. And then the fifth and final consideration that I will give you for pianos is resale value. This has less of an impact when shopping for grand. It has a very large impact when you're shopping for an upright piano, and I'll explain why. Upright pianos, in terms of brands and in terms of models, have a much higher rate of turnover in the piano industry than grands do. And because upright pianos are not often thought of as aesthetic complements to homes, or at least not as often as grands are, people will only pay top dollar for used upright pianos that have the brand recognition or the model acclaim. They're not going to pay what you want them to pay if you've gone with a brand which is either quite new to the market, unknown to the market, or is from a company known for churning brands pretty consistently, like some of the stencil brands that come out of some of the factories in China. This is not to say that I'm saying don't buy those pianos, because a lot of times those pianos can offer really great value. What I am saying is that if your intent, or you think there's a very high likelihood that you will want to be selling that instrument or upgrading that instrument in a reasonably close amount of time, 5 years, for example, even 10 years, if that's something that you know is on the radar, that's where brand and model selection can have a major impact on resale. And I'll give you an example. If you were to buy an off-brand, and when I say off-brand, a brand that doesn't have, let's say, street recognition, for $7,000 or $8,000, and you cared for that instrument really, really well, it was in perfect condition, and 10 years from now, you go to sell that instrument, there's a good chance that you will have to sell that piano for $3,000, $4,000, possibly even less than that. So you're talking about a 50% hit to your original investment. If you'd spent the same amount of money on a brand that with quite a bit of street recognition, and especially if the model was a known model, there's a good chance that you're going to be selling that piano for within 20 to 30% less what you bought it for, meaning you've preserved 70 to 80% of your original investment. So here are some of our favorite upright pianos currently on the market that you may want to do some more research in. This is hardly an exhaustive list. We have over 50 upright pianos that we constantly deal with here at Merriam Pianos, and there's probably close to 100 out there in the wider piano universe. But here's some favorites that I'm sure you're going to come across in your research that you may want to give a little extra focus. Starting at the lower end, some great experiences we've had with the Pearl River 118 and 121 sizes, as well as their premium Rittmuller UX or UH models, both really well done and a fabulous value. Kawai has an ND21 model, which is a 48-inch Indonesian-built instrument, which has been highly popular in Europe, Australia, here in Canada. Not necessarily available in the United States, but if it is available somewhere, you've got it. A phenomenal instrument for the price that they offer it. Getting into the meaty middle range of the industry, of course, we've got the Kawai K300 or the Yamaha U1, a famous matchup. Also moving up, we've got the Kawai K500 and the Yamaha U3, also a great rivalry there. Both instruments that are worthy of research and checking out. Moving up into the European range, Hoffman T122 is a piano that's just been phenomenally popular, as well as a Willem Schimmel W118. So one is a Czech, one is a Polish instrument, taking advantage some slightly more affordable Eastern European labor, but still some fantastic material and quality control from their German counterparts, Schimmel and Bechstein. And then getting into more premium range, the Bechstein A124 has been a phenomenal instrument all around the world. Bechstein folks have been telling us that they simply cannot build enough of those particular instruments. Certainly easy to understand why. And right at the very top of the industry, we've got the C. Bechstein Concert 8, Bösendorfer 130, or the Schimmel Concert Series, all making wonderful upright instruments and instruments that we have had a lot of experience with and certainly love here at Merriam Pianos. We're going to put a lot of those links down in the description below so you can check some of those instruments out with a little more depth. And of course, explore the website and the YouTube channel, because we have hundreds now of videos, piano reviews, piano playing comparisons. If you're into pianos, we hope you'll love it, and we hope that you will stay and become a regular community member. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Stu Harrison. This has been Merriam Pianos on YouTube, and we'll see you again soon.